Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Stanislaus, good to see you again.
You too.
Your office has been very good to work with over the years on some of these matters. My district and Congressman Johnson, we share that along the Ohio River is an old area, old mature industries of chemical and steel, glass, pottery that have been ripe over the years for problems with Superfund. So I think that in my career, my life as an engineer, I've experienced quite a bit of that, and about the Superfund sites and the contamination that occurs with that. Under the Superfund site, that there is a concern that, and maybe it's valid, is that when a Superfund site is designated as a Superfund site, that becomes a stigma on that area. Would you not agree that if you've got land 100 acres or so that's been designated a Superfund site, that would cause you to be concerned about locating a school next door to it?
Well, I think any contaminated site, creates concerns. We've done studies and have independent studies that show that once a site is cleaned up.
No, I didn't say that. I said whether it's designated. Once it's designated a site, because I'm going to lead into it.
Okay.
Is that I think it has a stigma and an effect on other development around it. And unfortunately, there was an article that came out earlier this year. I'd like you to respond to it by a conservative group, Daily Caller. But Ethan Barton came out in April of this past year and through his investigation found out that, and I think it follows a little bit about what some of the other folks have been talking about, that these sites that get designated as Superfund may not get any attention for years. Give me some statistics that show up in this, that of there are 2/3 of the sites that have been designated, nothing's been done with it. 771 of the 800 sites have been waiting 5 years for something to be done with it. 154 of those designated sites have been waiting 30 years before work has even begun on it. And it's a stigma on that community and people's concerns about what their water quality, any other air quality, anything else that comes with it. And then they found out that once it gets designated and cleanup, sometimes according to that it might take 30 years, 13 years on average to clean up a Superfund site. 54 of them apparently took 20 years to clean up. And all that while that water was contaminated or the air was contaminated with it, the soil contaminated with it, the community was stigmatized with it by having this. So, Mr. Stanislaus, what can we do to address this problem? Because I don't think once we designate this and we put this red mark on a community or a site, why should we be waiting 20 years before something happens with it, or 54 years before something begins?
Mm-hmm. So,
would you disagree? I'm sorry, I don't mean to blindside you on that, but on Barton's article, have you seen this article at all?
I have not. I will take a look at it.
If you would take a look, I'd like to hear back from you on that. And so, what's holding it up?
Well, I would say that the original stigma is the mismanagement of the site that comes from decades of work.
But we can't go back and redo that. So once you've designated it, I want you to do something.
So 68% of sites on the national priorities list have what's called construction completion. So that means all of the construction of the cleanup remedy is in place. Now sometimes, for example, groundwater does take decades, but redevelopment can happen, and does happen, once you have construction completion.
But you just heard what I said. Some of these sites have taken 54 years. On average, it's 13. I've seen some success. And we've had in the Weirton area, the Business Development Corporation with Pat Ford and what he's done up there. They took a site that had been abandoned, it was a contaminated site, and now they've got people working on it. It's functioning. So my hat's off to Pat Ford and the whole group up there. But they've got to get it finished. Not Pat Ford, but all these others. If we have all these sites waiting 20 years, 13 on average, that's too long. I want to know, what does it take to get it done quicker?
Well, I think I think ongoing diligence of the management of those sites, I completely agree. However, I don't think that 13 years is accurate from this perspective, right? So you can have productive activity at a site while the long-term cleanup is going on. There are numerous sites where companies have sited on a Superfund site where groundwater cleanup or other kind of cleanup is continuing.
All right, I've run out of time on that, but again, could you please get back to me and explain your perspective on Barton's article?
Sure.
Thank you. I yield back.
Gentleman's